Let's turn to Genesis chapter 4. I'll read from verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering. When it says that God respected it, it means that God was pleased with it. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Let's read Genesis chapter 3 verse 15 first, and then I'll talk about this. Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. As a result of the devil's temptation, they lost the Garden of Eden. Once they had sinned, the Garden of Eden was lost to them. So Adam's wife Eve became very angry in her heart. And so enmity arose between her and the serpent, that is Satan. She became extremely angry, but God said that when the seed of the woman was born, he would repay this enemy. He said he would bruise the head of the serpent. So when the seed of the woman was born, he would crush the serpent's head, and the serpent would die. And the seed of the serpent would bruise the heel of the seed of the woman. This is talking about Jesus' death on the cross. Since God would raise him from the dead, it is only his heel that would be bruised. But at this time, the thoughts of the devil had already entered Eve's heart. When she heard the words telling her that if she ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and her eyes would be opened and she would be like God, she ate some of the fruit, because the words of the devil had entered her heart. So she didn't have the power to be able to understand God's words. She didn't have the power to be able to recognize and understand God's words correctly, and realize precisely what he was saying. When God said that the seed of the woman would be born, he was referring to a time in the distant future when Jesus would be born and destroy the enemy, the devil. But how did Eve understand these words? She thought that if she gave birth to a son, that son would be the seed who would repay her enemy. This is how she understood him. So she didn't have the power to be able to understand the words of the Bible correctly. So as you are listening to all this talk of the Bible now, there will be certain passages that you find easy to understand, while other passages will be very difficult for you. And you may find that you have an adverse reaction to what you hear. Why is this? It is because you have another voice inside you. In your heart, there's another voice. A power that is trying to prevent you from understanding the Bible and realizing what it is saying. You need to acknowledge this. This is the law of sin. It is the law of sin, and it comes from the devil. So, if you are having a problem accepting the words of the Bible, it isn't because you are intelligent. It's an extremely dangerous matter. Look what it says in Genesis chapter 4 verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Look what it says here now. Now this is it. Now I've borne a son from the Lord. This is the seed that will repay my enemy. So she gave him the name of Cain. She had been deceived. She had not understood God's words correctly. She hadn't realized what he had been saying. This son was not the seed of which God had spoken. This son was the seed of the devil. So she had a son, but even after a long time had passed, this son did not repay her enemy. And then she had another son. Verse 2. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. The name Abel means futile. She had Cain, but it was futile. She had Cain, but he was not the son she had been hoping for. So she gave her second son the name of Abel. These two sons had different occupations. Cain was a farmer and worked hard with sweat streaming down his face. And Abel was a shepherd. In those days, being a shepherd just meant going out into the fields with the sheep and making sure they were grazing properly. Then Cain harvested some of his crops and offered them as a sacrifice to God. In those days, offering sacrifices like this was the way in which people worshipped. Cain brought some of his crops and offered them to God, while Abel slaughtered a lamb and offered this to God. But God didn't accept Cain's offering. Why didn't God accept Cain's offering? Of the two, Cain's offering had required more dedication and was the product of more sweat and effort. Let's turn to chapter 3 and read from verse 17. Then to Adam he said, "Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, 'You shall not eat of it.' Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." Cain had put everything into his work, and with much toil and sweat, he produced an offering of the fruits of the ground. But when he brought this offering to God, God rejected it. He didn't accept Cain's offering. You probably think God is very cold-hearted. That's not to say that agricultural work is wrong. Why was this? Do you know why God didn't accept Cain's offering? Look what it says here. It says the ground was cursed. Verse 17. Then to Adam he said, "Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, 'You shall not eat of it,' cursed is the ground for your sake." What are the fruits that come from the ground that has been cursed? Cain offered the fruits of a curse. And because he offered the fruits of a curse, he was cursing God. Let me explain what this means. Man has a physical body, doesn't he? This physical body is also from the dust of the ground. Since man's physical body was made from the dust of the ground, all his sweat, hard work, dedication, and efforts are the fruits of a curse. They have nothing to do with God. Nothing whatsoever.